John Wang, co-founder and CTO of Assembled, they built a multi-million-dollar product that had a product market fit that startups always envy to get quickly. But the company almost tore itself apart in this process. I'm Suresh Matthew. Welcome to One Idea. Welcome to the show, John. Thanks for having me. So in 2023, you're in the process of building your company. GPT 3.5 landed or crash landed. So you had to respond quickly. You did respond very quickly, swift response. You assembled the team, you executed it. So what was the first thought for you? What are the options right in front of you? Why did you pick this?
Yeah, good question. We, at the time, this was kind of like late 2023. We had tens of millions in ARR actually on our kind of like built out product that was for workforce management. Basically the product was, how do you make support teams better at figuring out how many people you need and where to put them? And that was a really good business, actually. We were continuing to grow. And then we were looking at this and we were like, this is crazy, honestly. Like 3.5 Turbo has just unbelievable abilities to write responses. And anyone who is reasonably sane at the time, looking at the industry, would be like, if you think about that and you think about how many, like, how many support people are actually going to be needed in the future, you put two and two together and you're like, okay, this is something that we want to be ahead of in terms of the trend. And because our business is really built on support, how do you configure people inside of support? And we have a per headcount model as like a standard SaaS business. We wanted to go do something very quickly. And the real question was like, what to do, how to do that. So we came up with this idea, which was, let's bring together a few really, really good folks and just do a YC startup again. And just like run the YC playbook as much as you can. That was the initial impetus for all of that.
Was it more about the team that you thought can build this, or is it a specific property of the AI itself that you thought this probably is the right choice here?
There's a few moving pieces all at the same time, right? It was like, on the one hand, there were parts of our team that we were trying to improve upon, like processes, like how do we work as a team? 2022 had come along pretty recently. And during that 2022, like most other companies, we had overhired. And that had done a big change to our culture, right? And the kind of like, let's go build something, let's make it happen, kind of like, the drive and the ownership wasn't quite as there as you wanted it to be. The other thing was like, well, like big important piece of our business that we want to be a part of. And we want to have the ability to potentially see where this goes. Like huge open market opportunity here. We knew already how big support is, like 20-30 billion dollars in SaaS software spend in customer support, but across the world you have like 300 or 400 billion dollars total in headcount spend. So it's all in the headcount spend. So we wanted to do that. And then also we had a few folks who were really, really good. And they were like chomping at the bit to do something. I myself was like running, engineering teams. And I was like, oh man, like that's not where I don't want to be running engineering teams, like pushing like docs here and there. I want to be like in it building something. So there are like all three of those parts composed of like really the overarching theme is like, we don't want to be late on this trend. We want to be the people pushing forward and actually having like some type of AI solution for our customers who don't really know what this thing is all about and where this might go.
When it comes to execution, were you optimizing for something specifically, or this was really the thing that came to your mind first?
Yeah, I mean, we were optimizing for speed, right? Basically what we had done was we took a 4-person group. Like we actually went out and we're like, here's some applications. Anyone can join this team. We're going to be in the office 5 days a week. You're going to work really hard. And you're going to have very little support from anyone outside of these 4 people, right? Like you're not going to have marketing help. You're not going to have sales help. You're just going to be walled off in this little room doing like trying to build a business. We were optimizing for speed and autonomy and ownership, right? And that's because, I started a YC company back in 2014, and the most productive I've ever been was during YC, when it's just like you go and you try to optimize a single metric as much as possible, and you're kind of like in it really, really deeply with everyone else who's in that room with you. And so we were trying to recreate that experience.
Was there anything specific that you thought only this team could do that the rest of the org would be reluctant to do outside of all the characteristics that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were just ready to take bigger risks, right? Because the rest of the company was optimized for enterprise fast scaling,
Okay.
which was essentially like we have all these big customers like DoorDash and Robinhood and Stripe, and these big customers require a very particular way of building software, right? It's like you cannot launch unless you A/B test every single thing that you're doing. And it does mean that the types of products you release and the way that you release is very different, right? And so this was kind of almost like a reset moment where we could take a small group of people and be like, what can we actually create when there are fewer boundaries put onto it? We were actually very successful in building products very, very, very quickly. We iterated through many, many different products. I think I personally talked to about 100 customers, like, over the course of a few months, actually. So a lot of calls early on. And, and the product grew really quickly, as well. You didn't even need AI back then. You just needed kinda, like, blood, sweat, and tears a little bit. But even back then, we were able to ship really, really fast and ship stuff that was very useful very quickly too.
Now, tell me a little bit about what you were trying to do. What were you trying to do? A different feature or a different version of the product? What exactly were you trying to do with this team without you getting a lot into the details?
Yeah. No, so that was actually a point of a lot of discussion, between myself and, my other co-founder. And at what we ended up saying was like, "Hey, your general purview on this team is to go figure out what to do with AI in customer support." And we could have said something much more specific, like, "Hey, we are going to have you go, incorporate AI into our existing, like, workforce management software and figure out how do you actually use this in order to, say, ingest schedules better or provide better recommendations for where your people are actually staffed on any given day." The other thing we could have potentially done, was specify a specific type of problem, right? Like make human agents better at their jobs, or automate away pieces of customer support. But we intentionally actually left it pretty open ended for the team to figure that out. And I think that was part of the idea of like, we want to take away as many boundaries as possible from thinking about like having to put so much stuff into the existing product and so much thinking into the existing product instead of having to like come off from a particular place. It was just like, okay, it's like whiteboard is clear. Whether I would do that again, we can talk about that later. But I think that was the direction initially. And I think it really did lead to some good thinking and some very generative ideas. Yeah.
So your mentality was really, let's do this and we can reset if required. And I'm thinking that probably helped accelerate a whole bunch of things. Now failure is okay, right? Or it's expected. So now success becomes, yeah, if it happens, it's good. Otherwise, it's okay. When you started building it, was it almost like a design partnership with customers, or is it just ideation and just building a small MVP out first and then handing it off to the sales and marketing team?
It was founder-led sales again. So we had 2 engineers, myself, I'm an engineer, and I talk to customers, and then we had a business person. So what we'd do is because we have a pretty big customer base, that was our advantage, basically. It was like, why are we gonna do better than a startup is because, well, we have distribution.
Exactly. Exactly.
Amazing distribution. So what we did was like we would go to our customers, we would talk to them. We read the mom test like over and over, which is this book that I love, which is like, how do you get real good advice from your mom You can't ask your mom, "Hey, mom, do you like this painting I drew?" Your mom's gonna say, "Yes, I love your painting," right? You have to figure out how to coax that real information out of someone that is inclined to say nice things to you, right? So we did that a lot with our customers, and that led us to kind of like these early pilots, right? So the first thing we ever started off with was just a Slack bot that answered questions about your general product. I think we sold to a very, very technical customer actually. And after that, we had a few other customers that we were talking to where we realized, well, all of their human agents, they don't use Slack. They use Zendesk or they use Salesforce. And they're not in Slack on a day to day, but they're in Zendesk and Salesforce on a day to day. So then the next thing we built was actually a Zendesk app that lived directly inside of Zendesk and could answer the questions instead of like having to leave and go to Slack. You could kind of like get that question answered there. And so that was a progression of basically how do we make sure that we were listening to customers and doing the right thing that they're actually wanting us to do. So we actually did ask for payments. We wanted revenue. We wanted all the things that you would want as kind of like an early stage startup.
So generally, I see a question from the board when there is revenue being built. Why are you doing this? What? Give me some more context there.
Yeah, our board originally, was actually pretty mad about us branching into this because they were like, "Hey, we invested in a company that is doing workforce management. Why are you putting resources into all of this AI stuff?" Um, First of all, it was only 4 people. Yes, it was the co-founder, but also it was a relatively small resource. And also, yeah, we were making lots of revenue actually, and millions in ARR at a certain point. But the board was still very concerned about kind of the split outs of the mission, the kind of like differing versions of what is assembled doing. So that's where the board really was honing in, and I think we had to spend a lot of time talking through how are these two things complementary to each other? How do we build AI agents as well as workforce management for humans? Um, and how do those fit together? And it really actually took a huge toll on the team because it was like, I think as soon as the board had some questions about this, the rest of the company also was like,
Yes.
whoa, the board isn't behind this. Like, we're not behind this. And it really kind of like tore a seam across the team. And I think especially the way that we went about building out the early team just really created a lot of tension amongst the teams.
And how did you eventually convince the board that this was a good idea? How much revenue?
That's always great. And in terms of like growth as well, it's like I think we 4x revenue
With
last
this new
year
product?
with this new product. Yeah. So a lot of growth, very quick growth. But the other part is that we started to paint this picture of like how does AI and humans and customer support work in harmony? Because we realized also as we were building the product, there's certain companies out there who are way behind. They're not doing AI at all. They're just doing the human stuff, the old school customer support. That's not us for sure. But there's also the new age, like autonomous agent startups that are like, I'm going to make sure you never talk to a human ever. And I'm going to automate every single customer support reply. Uh, and that also is pretty good most of the time, like 90% of the time. Like I think we did an analysis and somewhere in the vicinity of like 50 to 90% of support can be actually automated, but 10% is actually a lot, you know, 10%, 5 to 10%, uh, especially when your customer support interactions are very long tail. I think that's relatively common that you don't remember any particular customer support interaction. The point I'm trying to make is that when you have a good support interaction, that's like baseline, what you expect.
Yes.
If you have a bad support interaction, that can really, really negatively affect your brand. And so what we realized as we were building these things out is that there's actually kind of like differential behavior of like whether you get a good support interaction or a really bad support interaction from AI. And people get, they've done studies. Pe- people get much angrier if it's AI giving you a bad support interaction. What we have decided and what we're doing now that is very exciting to the board is how do you bring the humans and the AI together? When do you decide to kind of like provide the AI response versus when do you hand off? Yeah. And like when you hand off, do you hand off to a tier one agent who might be outsourced, or do you hand off to an internal agent who's might be sitting next to your engineers and like really understands the product, but their time is very valuable, right? Figuring out that handoff, I think, is the key to our platform and where we have really kind of invested a lot of time.
So now, GTM alignment, right? I'm sure there were misalignments in the start, especially building this new feature, which is not part of your core persona or ICP use cases. How did you bridge that gap? How did you convince the GTM team to go after it?
Well, this was the hardest part, right? It's like I was on the way over, I was like rereading the end of like parts of the Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. And he talks about how it's so hard for companies to actually build new things because you're basically in the lens, like your entire company is focused on one particular lens of the world. Like, how do you optimize a particular metric? Or how do you like increase ARR for this particular product, right? And everyone is thinking that. And so it's really hard to like do something different. So initially, we didn't do a very good job, honestly. We we had that one salesperson, we had me, and we were selling a lot actually with founder led or like one salesperson sales. And it's because we were just willing to put in the effort. We were willing to kind of customize the product. We had really fast feedback loops as to what made the product really good. But actually trying to scale that with the team, we had a bunch of fits and starts. The first time we did this, we like released the product to the whole sales team. And the whole sales team, they were already selling this, workforce management. And they were like, this tool takes a lot of time to learn, you know?
Even before selling, to learn. You learn to sell.
Right. Just to learn to sell that original product is like non-trivial.
Was it the technical?
Yeah, it's a lot of technical details. You need to understand support. You need to understand our product. You need to understand like how do you compute metrics and like why scheduling is important, like how to sell to support leaders, things like that.
Is it selling to the same persona?
It actually is selling to the same persona. Though it can be different depending on where you get into the enterprise markets. And that's one of the areas that I wish we would have thought about a little bit more is like, how do we actually start with a single persona and sell to them? Because it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, especially for the GTM team, yes.
Exactly. The first time we did this, we launched it to the whole go-to-market team. It was like, okay, sell this thing. Like we've been making millions of dollars on this. It's easy. And very little, very little money came through, like very few contracts. And we were scratching our heads. We were like, we put together all this enablement. We talked about this product. Like we do releases every week. What's going on? And it's precisely because we were doing releases every week. It was like a completely different product. You have to stay up to speed with not just our product, but like realize, oh, here's what AI is. How do I even sell AI if I don't understand AI yet as a seller? And like maybe I'm not even convinced on the applicability of AI to support teams. So that was a huge amount of kind of like go-to-market thrash that we had to figure out how to deal with. We kind of like went back and forth a few times. So like after we did that initial thing, we were like, okay, let's pull it back to founder-led sales and maybe just add one or two more people. And we were trying to figure out, okay, what is the scalable go-to-market motion here? How do we sell that well? And we went through a few cycles of that before kind of ultimately finally landing on most of the team like sells both products, but there's a team that's dedicated to selling the AI product now, and a team that's dedicated to selling kind of like the workforce management product. Everyone can still sell multiple pieces, but getting the feedback loop was still really important. So making sure that there's at least one go-to-market team that's like focused on like how do I test out strategies for selling this? That was really important for us.
So it was a smaller team formed to start off the scales? Was that a solution? How did you bridge the gap?
It's a smaller team that then brings out the kind of the strategies out to the rest of the team, right? Because like
So they start selling, or they just start or build some enablement sessions.
they're the people who like really understand the product, and then they go and enable the rest of the team with the learning.
So the first call is done by them.
Yeah.
You went from not almost, zero to millions of ARR in 18 months. And now it's time to scale up. You found some difficulties there, right? The first set, was it mainly organizational difficulties, or was it a product related, or was it both?
I think both, right? It's like on the organizational side, like everything that we just talked about. Like how do you bring this together? On the product side also, it's like, well, when you it turns out when you like take a team, you put them into a room separate from everyone else, that product does end up looking slightly different than your original product, right?
Which probably is the ideal outcome you expected too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we expected, and like for what it's worth, like I actually think this is a pretty reasonable outcome in terms of like, yeah, we made it to 5 million in revenue very, very quickly. And the next part is like, okay, how do we combine this with our with our existing product and make it really, really nice? The changes that we have been making on the product side have really been like actually before it was two separate entities. So there's like app.assemble.com and then there was cal.assemble.com, cal for kind of like our little mascot who does the AI. We combined those, right? That was really important because we need to be able to cross sell across these things. We also combined it was never that the design systems were different, but there were different types of interactions you would see. We started streamlining all of those. And then we also added product interplays, right? So the most important product interplay was what we call dynamic handoff. In workforce management, we get all these metrics, for example, like handle time. What's the wait time that you might be seeing for any particular subset of human people? In the AI world, it's like when you are deciding on whether or not to answer a question, you can do it based on just the question itself, or you can incorporate other pieces of information. For example, like wait time, right? It's like if you asked me, how do I make my website better? And AI gives an answer. And then you're like, no, like I actually meant this, right? At that point, at that instant, you can make a decision that is either hand this off to a human or continue trying, right? And making that decision actually should depend on how many humans you have available, right? Because like if you're gonna like hand off to a human and it's gonna take you 30 minutes to like, that's not a good experience. So if you don't have humans available, you should try a little bit harder to answer the question. And also, if you know a little bit of information about who is asking this question, for example, if it is someone who pays you $1 million a year versus someone who pays you $5 a year, you should have differing differing responses to how you answer. 100%. So that's the type of information and the metrics that we pulled from WFM into our AI products.
And what is WFM?
WFM is the kind of like the metrics and the ways that you can figure out how many people to staff on customer support and how to forecast that and how to pull in the information from kind of like different systems in order to understand how well is your human team staffed up. So a lot of real-time metrics, a lot of understanding about like what's going on a day-to-day basis on your support team. So that stuff was actually really core to making our AI product really good.
So from a time spent standpoint, how much time was spent on this alignment and how much time on really building the product?
The first year and a bit was just build the product, basically.
That's good. Clean.
All just build the product. Honestly, in the last like 6-12 months, I think it's still mostly build the product, but probably like 20% or so, 25% on alignment. And it's not that we don't need a lot of alignment. It's just that the products out of the fact that like we came from this original like enterprise app, we were like thinking in a certain way, right? So it's not like we were so different that we had to completely re-merge things together. It was same code base. We had like the understanding of what our original systems were, the understanding of our customers. So a lot of it was very similar. So we didn't have to spend as much time on alignment, but 20% or so of product specific time is on that. A lot of the go-to-market time is spent on alignment and how do we combine these two things together.
In GTM itself, right? Was marketing and messaging alignment harder than really training sales folks or both?
Those are both really hard. One, because I think our four-person team, this was a mistake that I think people probably shouldn't make, but we were just going so fast uh, that whenever we kind of like popped our heads above water
Uh-huh.
and like talked to the rest of the team, it was just big culture shock for everyone either way. Because we would talk to the marketing team and we'd be like, "Hey, we want to do this, and this, and like this is exactly we know our customers really well. We want to do this." And the marketing team was like, "Whoa, hold on, what are you trying to do here?" And we were like, we were trying to make like specific edits to the website. We were like, "Hey, can you give us Webflow access so that we can change this copy and we can update this thing?" And the marketing team was like, "This is not how we usually work, right?" Um, and so that was definitely a, a crossover that I would try not to replicate again. I think a lot of what our learnings were is like, like having the separate team being built out is really great, but then there has to be some amount of like, how do we kumbaya everyone together? Because the go to market is equally as important as the product, if not more important.
If not more important, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we spent actually a lot of time thinking about how do we meld these two things together. Most of our customers for a long time thought of us as a workforce management product. How do you convert that into a perception of workforce management and AI, or even what we are trying to convert to now, which is an orchestration layer, right? How do you orchestrate both AI and human support in the best way possible? But that journey took many months, a lot of discussions, a lot of like people pulling out their hair from both sides. And I think, yeah, if I were to go do this again, I think a lot more humility in the way that we approach the problem and how we like try to make sure that everyone's bought in to what we're doing. I think that would have been very helpful.
Now's the time when you're scaling and your ask is now exactly the opposite, right? Now I want to bring the team back.
Yeah.
And we want to align. Products need to align, the teams need to align. How was that conversation? How did that go? Were you able to get to a point pretty quickly?
Not pretty quickly, unfortunately. I think that a lot like the big learning for me was that, you know, we originally we had put together this like little team and we are like, hey, gonna try to do a lot of things differently. And I think that like, if you think of it like the efficient Pareto frontier of like different possibilities,
Mhm.
you're like over here and like there's other things that you can do. Like you can extend the existing product. Um, I think that the way that we kind of like made a separate team, confined to a room, just like did everything differently, that burns a lot of trust with the rest of your team. And that trust is very hard to build back up. So it actually took a long time for us to be able to like rebuild that trust with the rest of the organization. We've done a lot of things to kind of rebuild that, which is like physically reintegrating everyone, like, having offsites, talking with everyone about here's the combined vision, like saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, bringing people into calls so they can see the magic. Having our support team use our product, right? There's all sorts of things that we've done, but again, it's like a trust is not easily given. It can be
Easily taken by, yeah.
and so if I think that was one of the kind of major downsides to our approach of just like funneling everyone off is just you make a massive schism in the company. And I think for anyone else who's thinking about doing this, you have to be aware of the fact that this can really, really make your alignment in the company itself much, much harder.
And tell me, what are you still working on, right? Have we built the trust now, or are you still working on some of those?
Yeah. I think we've rebuilt a lot of trust, which is great. I think the company now really understands kind of the shared vision of what we're building, especially what we call the orchestration layer between the AI agents and the humans. So now it's really a matter of where do we, how do we focus our resources again in terms of um, continuing to see lots and lots of AI agents growth, because that market is really big and we're seeing a lot of pull from that market, which is very exciting. And also, how do we make sure that they complement each other, right? Historically, we took customers from our workforce management and just like cross sell, and we're selling them AI agents. Now I think there's actually a good amount of crossover that we can do on either way, right? It could be AI agents to workforce management or workforce management to AI agents. And I think both of those are pretty valid. And so now the question for us is like, we have a pretty broad product suite. Uh, and how do we kind of make sure that we are pushing forward in the right direction while keeping focus on the things that we need to keep focus on, while there's so much stuff that is like, you know, going fast. And I think that has been the major challenge for our executive team in terms of like, okay, where are we focusing? How do we focus everyone? Right now we are in we're in the world of like rebuilding our customer target profile segment so that it's much more aligned between our workforce management and our AI agents products.
If you were to rewind back to late 2023, what structural change would you have made to this whole team setup?
I think I would still have broken out the 4 folks. I think I would have spent actually much more time before breaking out the 4 folks on thinking about, here's our current buyer,
Mhm,
and here are the things that they care about,
mhm.
and let's go target this thing, or, have talked to some number of people, some number of our customers, and, like, really formed a strong hypothesis, and then kind of, like, said, "Hey, this team is going to be focused specifically on a particular problem," as opposed to allowing the team to run so wild that you could go anywhere. I think the reason to do that is because I think that would have allowed the rest of the company to understand. And I think it would have also allowed the team to be a little bit more focused. And because we already have probably a good amount of insight into what our customers want, it's not like we're not necessarily having to rebuild everything from scratch. There were a lot of things that we built that we just like threw away because we're like, hey, we kind of forgot about like 6 years ago when we did this thing originally, right? It was like, hey, should we try this again? The mechanics of like having a small team were not the problem. It was like the way we went about having a small team and kind of like rebuilding everything. And so I think there's a lot we could have done on kind of like enabling the rest of the company to understand why this team is important and why we're making a concentrated bet. And I think the concentrated bet would have made people a lot happier and made it a lot easier for us to kind of like align and reintegrate everything.
Now, for me personally, when I think of this problem statement, I wanted to ask you this. Everybody's looking for a solution based on AI, right? So especially large enterprises.
Okay.
It is not even about, can I solve this problem with AI? It's almost the other way around. What problems can I solve with AI, right? So it's almost like you're looking for a nail when you have a hammer in hand, right? So that's a very difficult problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes it pisses a lot of people off, especially the engineers on ground. They kind of hate when a leader looks for places where you can apply it.
Yeah.
For those who are trying this, right? What would be your suggestion there? How do they go after this problem statement? Everybody wants to be on AI. Yeah, coding, it's a direct it's an easier answer, right? So development, yes, you can make it easier. But for rest of it, from your experience, what would you say?
I don't think I'll say anything different than probably what most people would say, which is that most most of the time, finding what your user problem is the most important thing. Um, and oftentimes, AI can be used to make that really, really good or really fast. Like, I think we're in a world where AI actually is like really pushing the boundaries of like good enough in a lot of ways. And whether it is kind of like a small portion or a big portion, I think now it's not a matter of like, will you have any AI in this at all? It's just a matter of degree, right? Like in some use cases, maybe it doesn't actually make any sense to use AI, or maybe you just need to context engineer it really well. So for example, for our scheduling algorithms, we actually don't ask the AI, please schedule everyone so that, their optimal schedules and you have lunches and breaks that like fit in between these things and you like also pass labor laws. AI actually isn't very good at that. But linear programming is really good at that. And AI is really good at kind of like taking the different scenarios and being like, here are the potential ways that you might want to set up your constraints. And so I think it's more of a matter of like understanding what your user problems are, and then using whatever tools are available to do that.
So is there a role or your company size or the number of people or the size of the team? Does it matter in this whole adoption journey, right? For a large company, it'll be harder. For a smaller company, it's easier. Any take on that?
I definitely think it's harder at a big company for sure. But I think that I've seen like Ramp for example, is one of our customers actually, and I have seen their both engineering team and their support team kind of be on the bleeding edge of AI, both AI adoption, using AI tools, like all of that stuff. And so it's not a one-to-one mapping. I think at bigger companies, you have teams that can be devoted to DevOps basically, right? Or developer tooling. And they can basically be like, I've tested, Claude Code against Codex, against Conductor, against, using this with Kimi K2 versus like all of those things, right? And they can give you a recommendation on your code base, which is really, really nice. But at a bigger company, you have much more need to do change management. And at a smaller company, you just need to convince fewer people, and the code base is probably less gnarly. And you can actually go ahead and probably kick off a bunch of agents to you can what we've done actually on our engineering team is we've asked a bunch of agents like, how would you update our code base to make it better for using AI agents, right? That's some combination of improving CI/CD, making sure that our documentation is set up correctly, improving agents.md, uh, making sure our tests are parallelized, like all of these things, right? And that's just easier with smaller code bases.
Completely agree. In fact, thank you so much for walking us through this whole journey and finding a person who has completed this journey is very rare, right? So has experimented this, tried this at scale, got this successful, found the challenges with that success, and getting it back integrated back is like a very rare to find such a person. So thank you so much for sharing this. Hopefully, after this conversation, I personally will not make so many mistakes that I would have made otherwise.
Please don't. Yes. Please don't.